I believe this audience is pretty sophisticated on the issues of the nature of money, and you won't be surprised that Hyman Minsky held a very similar view to many sociologists, historians of money, assyriologists, numismatists, and namely that money in its nature and its origin is not a thing, it's not an object, but rather it is an abstract measure. It is an IOU, or a social credit debt relationship. Minsky called it a two-sided balance sheet event, which means that the physical manifestation of that social relationship always represents an asset to the holder and a liability to the issuer. In this context, then anyone can issue money, and indeed everybody does, in order to finance our economic activities. The point is, how do we get our money accepted in economic transactions? What is important, I think, from a Minskian perspective, this is also the perspective of the modern money theory, modern money approach, is to distinguish between privately created money and public money. In other words, private liabilities and public liabilities, and I'll spend just a couple of minutes talking about that. Because not all debt is created equal. Now, Minsky argued that you could look at the world, the landscape of financial instruments, and really study them as these kind of two-sided credit-debt relationships. And you can stratify social debt relationships in the simplified hierarchical fashion, where at the bottom of the money pyramid, we have privately created money. Those would be the IOUs, the liabilities of households or firms. And they will include anything and everything from simple things like company checks to electric bills, to mortgages, to sophisticated financial instruments, credit default swaps, derivatives, and on and on and on and on. So you could use this sort of analytical tool to look at whose asset a particular instrument is and whose liability it is. What is unique about privately created debt is that it can only be settled by delivering a third-party IOU. In other words, a mortgage is a money, it's a credit-debt relationship between me and my bank. But the mortgage gets extinguished when I deliver a third-party IOU, that is bank money, the IOU of a bank, and that is a demand deposit. I use part of my demand deposit to settle my debt. And that happens with all private sector transactions and private sector liabilities. Banks then clear payments between each other by delivering another third-party IOU, and in this case, reserves. And that is the IOU of the government. So at the top of the pyramid, Minsky argues, is state money. And for analytical purposes, it is useful to consolidate the federal government by looking at the Fed and the Treasury together. And we have the top of the pyramid, high-powered money, which includes coins, currency, and electronic reserves. What's unique about government money, or the government, is that it is the only agent in the economy that doesn't deliver a third-party IOU to settle its debts. It delivers more of its own liabilities in payment. And there's a lot more to be said to this story, but I have to sort of skip ahead and just want to point out that in the historical context, money really arises as a public good. And I can't go into the history, but I can refer you to a paper that I have on my website called Chartalism and the Tax-Driven Approach to Money, which sort of traces some of the historical record and basically argues that money is not a thing, but an abstract unit of account, an abstract measure. It is a state-administered unit of account used to standardize debts between debts and penalties between private parties and debts to and by the public authority. So, and this is normally the case even through ancient times. We have this public good, in other words, a state-administered unit of account. In the modern context, that public good has also evolved as a public monopoly, where modern states not only declare how debts, private or public, will be denominated, but they also determine the physical form of that unit of account, and they have monopoly over the issue of that physical form, whether that is a reserve or a coin.